Our guest today is John Weber. He's our partner with Crow, and so we're going to actually let him go ahead and present, and then, of course, we got Deidre as well as Barbara Henry here, our chief accountant associated with the audit. So I'll turn it over to John.
Okay, good morning. Well, thank you for having me.
We want you here.
I believe we have 15 minutes, so I'm not sure how we're going through every one of these pages. 15 minutes, but I will do my best. Actually, hoping you have a little presentation, and that's basically what I'm going to walk through today versus the whole report. So just going to talk a little bit about some of the fund financial statements, and then, of course, all of our auditor's results. So for the fiscal year ended, the general fund had revenues of about $91 billion, expenditures about 91.4 as budgeted for the revenues. I'm sorry. So basically, your revenue budget was right on line with your actual. Expenditure-wise, about $130.6 million in expenditures, with a budget of 146, so well under budget on the expenditure side of the general fund. The electric utilities fund, that had operating income for the year of about $98 million. Now, when I say operating income, I'm basically referring to just the operations to run the electrical operation. It does not include interest income, interest expense, or dividends to the general fund. And then the water and the wastewater fund had about $31 million in operating income for the year. So, I mean, those are some really just highlights of a few numbers. Again, certainly encourage you to read through this document, and especially the management's discussion and analysis section. That's a great way to, it's a comparative over a few years of numbers with some narrative on why numbers went up, why numbers went down, things of that nature that management puts together. And it's really, I guess I'll call it a good read. I know that might sound a little scary, but it's really a good read for you.
We would want you to think that's a good read.
Yeah, right. All right, so then, our opinions. So our opinion on the annual comprehensive financial report, as well as the CRA. We issue a separate report on Lakeland Electric, the department financial, and then we do audit the employees' pension and retirement system. So we had unmodified audit opinions. That is basically, you can think about it as a clean audit opinion. That means all the financial statements presented are accurately stated in all material respects. You may note, if you read our opinion, we reference other auditors. So we do not audit the police pension plan nor the fire pension plan. Other auditors do. They provide the information to the city to include in the report. So we reference them in our opinion. We also issue an internal control and compliance report. This is done in accordance with government auditing standards. So here, we're really looking to see if there's any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the internal control structure related to financial reporting. And happy to report to you, we did not note any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. The single audit report, that is related to the audit of federal and state grant funds. We had about $8 million in federal grant expenditures this year and about $42 million in state grant expenditures. So we're looking to see that you complied with laws and regulations, because there's a lot of rules related to how you can spend that money. So we do form an opinion on that. And we had an unmodified or clean audit opinion that states that you complied with the laws and regulations related to the spending of those grant funds. Again, we look at internal control related to the federal and state grant funds, and the control structure did not indicate any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in control with that either. We did not have any question cost during the audit, so there's nothing in the report that's going to suggest to the feds or the state that you should be returning money. So very clean audit. Certainly want to thank Mike, Barbara, Deidre, wherever Deidre went.
So we'll go get the handouts.
and the certainly entire team here. This is it's about a 2,000-hour job for us to get through everything and do all the audit work. And we do not just hit on a couple of people here in the city. We get around the city and talk to a lot of individuals. We kind of look at IT systems as well and how the technology is processing the data, things of that nature. So I just want to thank everybody here for all their efforts. And, again, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, John. Any questions from committee members? And we'll include Commissioner Madden since she's joining us as well. Any questions?
Just a comment that I think the scope of 2,000 hours is very interesting to me. I don't know that I would have known or guessed really that it was that many hours involved in the audit. And so that's pretty significant.
It is. Yep. We do some interim work in July, August, and then basically mid-December until we issue in mid-March. So.
John, Mike, anything in this report or in the audit that you would highlight or different from previous years? Seems to be very similar, but...
Go ahead, I'll let you go first.
Anything highlight?
No, there's nothing in particular that's different from previous years. I've said it many times for those that have been at the dais, but if it wasn't for all of our coworkers out in the field
Right.
and all of the offices that are adhering to all of the rules, the very stringent rules that we have, that would draw attention to my shop or then the auditors, that we wouldn't have as many opportunities for a clean audit each year as what we have. And that was a miscommunication between Deidre and John, so I apologize. You had said, hey, bring them, and she read it as, okay, you're going to bring them.
She replied yes.
Yes. So anyway, she's going to grab it, and it's just a few pages of handouts, but the mayor had seen it the other day when we had the required meeting with him prior, and so you'll have that. I'd encourage you to focus on the first couple charts with the revenues and expenses, and you get to see that we have been very fortunate to put on the Carnac hat and get pretty close on revenues again this year and estimating versus what we budgeted. Expenses, we underspent, and that is primarily because we had the vacancies. We have to budget for all positions in the city. We have a tremendous number of vacancies throughout the department. So that's added to that. Yes, sir.
One other thing, too, just the compliance with grants, when that's that significant a part of our budget, is so important. And back to teamwork. It's incredible work by all parties where all those grants have to be lined up right. And so we're so grateful for that leadership that makes that happen.
Yeah, great.
I guess I will mention, now I think about it, there was a new accounting standard this year.
Okay.
Called GASB 87, and it had to do with leases. So basically, all of your leases that are greater than 1 year are now recorded as assets and liabilities. That was not the case in the past. Whether you're the lessor or lessee, it changed accounting dramatically for the leases. And I will have to say, the city, you have well over 100 leases as lessor and lessee. And the city had to gather the data for every one of those leases, had to analyze every one of those leases to see if they met the criteria for recording under the new accounting standard. So that is the main difference. If you were to compare this report to last year, you're going to see some additional footnotes on what your future revenues are coming in as a lessor, as well as your future payments going out, as a lessee.
Thank you for that. That's
the government's way of trying to further ensure that our financial statements look like the business financial statements.
Commissioner Madden, did you have any questions?
She said they were two different, or they look the same? The mayor just gave one.
They're not the same.
They're not the same.
There you go.
Do we need a motion to, go ahead, yes.
So, going into utility committee today, just curious how this parlays into the discussion with Lakeland Electric and them feeling secure with auditing their financials as well, especially like in the legislative bill that, scrutinizes every year different publicly owned utilities to make sure that we're up to par. How is this going to be presented to the utility committee, or will that be?
No, John, you're finishing up the financials for them, right?
Yeah. The utility is in here.
It's part of
Part of this report. We have already audited it. We've audited the information. We've provided the unmodified opinion on it. We're just in the process of finalizing a separate report for Lakeland Electric that they issue. We should have that done early next week.
And that's something that Gina would typically just update you as the utility committee about, but there is no formal presentation to the utility committee about what's contained in this audit. If there was a concern in any way, if John would have brought it out, he would have had to bring it up with you. And then if that morphed into a conversation with the utility committee, then that's what we would have done if there was a concern on electric. But there is none. No concern.
It's just, when we're in legislative session and there are bills that could put that in jeopardy because of some bad actors, I think it's always good to kind of know those things, and then to over-communicate with the utility committee that we have had this audit, just not to us, so that they can feel secure as well when they hear other utilities might be under a little more scrutiny. We don't want a broad brush.
Agreed.
It's a good question. Thank you. Mike, do we need a motion to accept the report?
Please, because you've got to then submit it to the committee.
Motion for approval. We have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mike.
for the
Thank you,
time.
John.
And
Thank
thanks
you,
to
everyone.
Pro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can do it in 15 minutes.
And Mike, that's all.
I got a few more. Yeah.
You have some left.
Mike, that's all you have, right?
Before I talk.
Yes, thank you,
We
yes.
will adjourn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll wait for 3 minutes for our agenda study to begin. can get your attention. If I can get your attention, we'll get started. It's 8:30, and so our agenda said we'll begin, and as we go through this, as you can see, we'll have our normal call to order at 9. We're going to have Bill Anderson, and this will be his final time to do this, do the State of the Utility, over the water utilities, and beautification awards, and then we have 6 proclamations, making up for none last month, or last meeting, to some degree, and then we have committee reports, and that Finance Committee that we just had will be reported by Commissioner Cloud, and then we get to the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the minutes, as well as any other asterisk items on here, so you have to go to City Attorney C 1, 2, 3 for those, and we'll let you kind of tell us a little bit about this.
Okay, C1 is just the annual agreement the city enters into with the Polk Museum of Art to grant control over that footprint of the Mayfair event to Polk Museum that allows them to control that in a way that the city probably couldn't. They specify who can be there and who can't, who can use the places for the vendors, and it allows them to limit solicitations and that type of thing, much more so than the city can. They indemnify and provide insurance to the city and are required to clean up any, repair any damage that might occur at the event. It's the same agreement that we always have.
All right, leave that on consent? Okay, good. No objections? Thanks. Next.
Yeah, the next item is a task authorization with Strawn Trout. This is for renovations at the Glendale Water Reclamation Facility, specifically the Glendale Lab. The place was constructed probably 33 years ago, and I guess it's very worn. If you can look through your agenda packet, you'll see some of the pictures, and some of the things that Strawn Trout will be doing would be doing the design work. They're preparing the bid documents, as well as overseeing some of that construction work when it takes place for the renovation of the lab. We have an existing continuing contract for services with Strawn Trout. Upon your approval, they'll begin the design phase of that, which is a not-to-exceed cost of $96,780. That is included in the water utilities budget for FY 2023.
So it's already in the budget. Any questions or concerns on leaving that on consent? Yes.
No, I just have a comment. I remember walking through this during my orientation, and it literally brought me back to my dad's chem lab in 1980. I'm telling you, I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness. So, yeah, approved. It definitely is something else.
It's been well used.
Yeah, got our money's worth from it, sure.
Out of this one. All right, so we'll leave that on consent then. Okay, no objections. Next.
All right, the next item is an agreement with EnviroServe for them to provide grit removal services for the aeration basin at the Glendale Water Reclamation Facility. They were one of 2 companies that provided a quote to the city for this work, and they came in at $52,363.50, which was about $100,000 below the next lowest quoter on this project. They're going to provide all the labor and equipment necessary to remove the grit from the aeration basin at basin number 2 and dispose of the material off-site. Again, that cost is $52,363.50, and that is included in the water's FY 2023 budget.
This is a pretty typical interval to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's great.
I don't know what rotation they do, if they monitor it when they pull things down, but the grit in the first section of this aeration chamber tends to settle out. The rest of the process have bubbles that blow up and keep everything moving, but this is typically just a lot of sand, so it's just good old-fashioned vacuum trucks and dumpsters, and they suck it all out. This particular company has the ability to dewater it before it goes ultimately to a landfill.
Is that what made the pricing difference, do you think?
Actually, ACT is going to take it to the same company. As we were investigating this, there's no way anyone's going to beat their price, because everybody goes back to EnviroServe to take advantage of their dewatering equipment, whatever it is, before they take it to a landfill. Has to pass the paint filter test in order to go into a landfill, so they don't want a bunch of water going into a landfill, just product. So this will be dewatered before it goes to a landfill.
Thank you. Commissioner Music.
How thick are we talking? What's the cubic?
It was in here, I think there's depths as deep as 3 feet. And a lot of it, again, it's water, so it's not like it's compacted. And I think they were talking 6 days of 12-hour days of vacuuming and filling up, I think maybe 11 dumpster loads to haul off and get dewatered.
So is it similar all to a septic tank where things are settling in certain compartments and it's moving, or why settling here and not the other sections?
And so when it first comes into the plant, there is a grit removal process that doesn't capture everything. And so when it gets past that, this is the next step in the process. And it's just a low spot for it to collect. Air bubbles keep some of it moving, but then it drops out.
Heavy enough to drop, sure.
Sorry for the science lesson in this. Is the majority of this sand?
Yes.
And is that from intrusion into the?
Probably floor drains. I don't know if it's
Okay.
necessarily infiltration or whatnot, but
Infiltration.
floor drains and everything else. It's just a combination of all of it.
Because we live in the city.
Laundry.
Yeah.
Beachy area.
Is it all right to keep that one on the consent? All right, seeing no objection. So that takes us through our consent items, and we'll leave those asterisks just as they are on the surviving agenda. There were no requests to appear from the general public. I'll make a note on this one. Peace is going to bring some individuals, and they had desired to appear on the general public in this slot, but they were past the cutoff when they made that request. So they will do their portion that they want to share with us, which relates to some policing issues. They will do that in the general comments area at the end. So I have advised them to try and defer a little bit of time appropriately to not come till 10:30. So we have room for people who might be in the chamber earlier for other matters and a guest, and so that we'll set a table up outside in the hall that does people who want to speak sign up from Peace for however many attend. Their goal is to have those speakers be 1 minute. I gave them a cap of 3 minutes on each speaker, because if you have 10 minutes, 30 minutes. And so that activity will start around 10:30 in the hallway, and then they'll start coming in, and depending on how we move through the agenda, I think that's going to actually work well for the switch in terms of the number of people that were there. Okay? All right. So otherwise, no request to appear from the general public. And by the way, I also offered them the April 17th meeting if they wanted to comply with the time frame. Their timeliness is the reason they'd like to do it earlier. We have equalization hearing, and so that's the normal lots clean and clearing.
Yes.
We're good on that. Yes,
Just
sir.
a question on that, just because this came up on a personal matter for me. I had purchased a piece of property and it ended up getting through the system and I never got the notification. So I had my mow guy already set up. How are we handling that if it gets returned back to the city as non-deliverable? What is the next step to find the person if they don't have access to look at this?
I think we published the notices as well, but it's sent to the notice is sent to the property owner's mailing address on the property
Okay,
appraisers.
so because it hadn't switched over to my name yet, it went just to the house, which I haven't been at, so okay.
Yeah.
So ultimately, though, you're assuming that whoever owns it is at that address, so sending that to them, but how's that?
I mean, the property owner, when they do a transaction, needs to notify the property appraiser of their mailing address as opposed to the
Right.
address of the property, so
Right.
that any notices and the tax bill will go to their actual mailing address. So.
Mr. Ruiz?
Well, when our code enforcement staff is alerted to the fact that a new owner acquired a property and that we were in that transition period, sort of where they don't just rely on the appraiser's records. That is, of course, their first stop. They do access and research the clerk of court's official recording database to actually look for the deed. Now, if it was recorded, then they would have found that.
Okay.
But those systems aren't perfect when we're talking about days or weeks. But when they are notified of a notice issue like that, they work with the new owner to either remove the administrative cost administratively or, come to some resolution recognizing that the new owner isn't the old owner.
Gotcha, okay.
Good question. Anything else on that? Okay, past equalization hearings, we'll go to public hearings. A1.
All right, A1 is the request for a major modification for property on the west side of Hardin, just north of Beacon Hill Terrace, I believe is the name of the mobile home park, where a self-storage warehouse facility. We are expecting, warehouse may not be the right terminology, it's just a self-storage facility. We're expecting a pretty good crowd for that one. I would just remind you that this is a quasi-judicial hearing. It's a rezoning case, essentially. And so any decision that you make needs to be based on competent, substantial evidence in the record at Monday's hearing. So definitely need to develop the record, and your decision needs to be based on what you hear on Monday. I know planning staff can provide some slides today if you'd like some background this morning, or we can wait until Monday.
Would you like to do that and have a little background on it? Or are you good?
I mean, I'm good on the background. We've seen this before.
And you've seen the new renderings, right?
Unless there's anything planning staff just thinks they need to share today.
No new information.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, next.
All right, next is a resolution adopting the city's local housing assistance plan, which specifies how we intend to use SHIP housing funds for the next 3 fiscal years. We're required to essentially have a public hearing on that, and I don't know if Mike Smith's here. I don't know if we're changing any intended use of these funds from
There hasn't
previous
been any
years.
major changes in the plans that we have for it. We changed a little bit during the year last year, but everything that we've done in the last LHAP was the same as what we're doing, the same strategies. And I'll have just a brief little presentation showing what our budget is and what the strategies are at the meeting, and that's pretty much it. Open it up to questions. It's not required to be a public hearing, but we like to open it up to a public hearing just to get the public feedback.
Any additional information needed? Yes, sir.
I see this one, is this down payment assistance or is this actually a mortgage per se?
The down payment assistance is one of our strategies that we use from the SHIP LHAP program. We also use CRA funding for that, but that is one of the strategies is the down payment assistance.
I see they give the $85,000 on something.
So depending on the strategy, we kind of set up different amounts for the most. I think the $85,000 is one of our rental strategies that we have as a maximum for that. The down payment assistance is $28,000 of SHIP funding that we would use. For the totals for down payment, they can get up to $30,000 of down payment assistance. Part of that's the CRA funding, so if they're in the CRA, there's an extra $10,000 that they get. And then there's $6,000 of closing costs and $2,000 of admin fees that go towards the administration of it.
And we're getting about $350,000, that was...
For SHIP, we're going to be at about $1.3 million. That was the latest estimate. I think it actually may have been finalized last week, but usually when we're presenting this, we don't have the final numbers yet. Last year we had, I believe it was $1.1 million, so it went up a little bit this year. It's projected to.
Because I saw they're going to allocate $700 million in different programs. I didn't know how that was allocated.
Yes.
Should we get more?
So this is the most we've gotten, and it might be the most we've ever gotten.
I think it is.
3 or 4 years ago, we were getting about $150,000 to $200,000, and then it jumped up to $800,000 or $900,000, and it's been hovering around $1 million the last 3 years, I believe. So yeah, they're finally fully funding the SHIP funds. Some of that goes to rental development projects through Florida Housing Finance Corporation, like the tax deed properties and the sale bonds. And then the rest of that's going, or a lot of it's going to the allocation communities, like the cities and the county. And so we're upping the amounts. We're doing the same strategies. We're just upping the amounts we're giving to those strategies. For rental development, we can do up to 25% of that. So we've increased our rental development amount to, it's around $250,000 now. In the past, we've only had maybe $40,000, $30,000 that we've been able to use for rental. So it does open up some new possibilities for the rental development stuff for us.
When we consider this whole topic of affordable housing, workforce housing, down payment assistance is so much an imperative. Because when you think about the opportunities that some have, maybe from intergenerational wealth or from whatever growing income-wise that others don't have. because there's this need for an initial capital base in order to be able to build appreciation equity. It's always a balance in that, so that's extremely important for us, and to see that money used wisely, and we're so grateful for your overseeing that as we go along. Mr. Simmons.
Thank you. Mike, what's the maximum amount of assistance to be granted to a recipient?
So each strategy we have has a different amount. So I know for down payment assistance, it's $28,000. We've got, each strategy has a different amount. It's based on how much we think that strategy per unit is going to use. So on Monday, I'll have a chart that's our goals chart, and it breaks it down by our maximums, how many units we think we're gonna get out of that. So, you know, if it's $80,000 for owner-occupied rehab, we would put, you know, we'd say we want to spend about $300,000 on that so we can get 4 units out of that. So each strategy has a different amount. The rental assistance, I think we currently have at $350,000. But we don't even get $350,000 that we can use towards rental, but we want to keep that as high as we can in case the amount goes up. So depending on the strategy, we've kind of factored in how much of it we can use. There's also certain set-asides we have to meet. We can only use a certain percentage for home ownership. There's a certain percentage that has to go to extreme or low income, different levels, 30% below, 60% and below. So it limits what strategies we can use that money for. So that kind of dictates how we go through and put those maximum amounts in there.
Any other questions on this one? All right. Are we next?
Yeah, we're down to miscellaneous
Yes.
public hearings. We have 2 development agreements that are related to one another. One is with Pipkin Creek Properties LLC, and one is with Pros Lakeland Owner LLC. They are proposing to develop, Pipkin Creek Properties is proposing to develop 426 single-family units on approximately 428 acres south of the Parkway Frontage Road and east of Pipkin Creek Road. And then Pros Lakeland is proposing to develop a 391-unit multifamily development on around 22 acres, just adjacent to the Pipkin Creek Properties development. Traffic studies up to this date have indicated that there's going to be a need for a traffic signal to be installed at the intersection of Pipkin Creek Road and the Parkway Frontage Road. And the estimated cost of that using 2027 values is $547,833. So these development agreements, essentially, their primary purpose is to specify how that's going to be allocated amongst these 2 developers. Pipkin Creek Properties LLC, under their development agreement, will be responsible for paying $361,570 of that amount. And Pros Lakeland will be responsible for paying $186,263 of that amount. And in exchange for both these developers making their proportionate payment for those signalization costs, they will receive concurrency vesting for the estimated number of trips that each development will generate. Pipkin Creek Properties, that's their development's called Lakeside Preserve, is going to generate and be vested for 4,088 daily and 429 PM peak hour trips, and then Pros Lakeland would be vested for
2862 daily.
where are you seeing that? Okay, there it is. Okay, 2,862 daily and 219 PM peak hour trips.
Point of information, how well is this cost estimate going to be to the time of its application?
I would say that it's as detailed as we could get it. Pipkin Creek Properties actually paid for an engineer to put together a certified set of cost estimates. So, I mean, there's always variability in market and inflation and things like that, and we believe that we've captured as much as we can.
For the time that it'll be installed.
For the time that it'll be installed, and so the inflation factor was a big part of that.
Okay, good. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Reed.
Chuck, how long will these impact fees be good for? Perpetual, or is it going to be 5 years if they don't use them, or give the money back, or can somebody, if we're tying them up and somebody wants to come in and do something else and they're just stalling for some reason?
For Pros Lakeland, there's a kind of a clawback provision that if we don't do anything, or if the project doesn't move forward by 2035 in terms of the actual intersection improvement, then we would provide a refund. they don't get a building permit within 365 days of the execution of the agreement, then the concurrency vesting goes away. So there's something on that agreement that would address that issue. On Lakeside Preserve, it's a little bit different in that they're providing their dollars, and we broke it up into two phases. One's that, it's concurrent with construction plan approval for the subdivision, and then concurrent with the notice of commencement when actual construction would begin. Once they make the second and final payment, then they would be vested in perpetuity for the 426 lots cumulative. There's 135 that are already in place in phase one, so what we're looking at now is, I think the balance is 289 between 2A, which was approved last year but hasn't begun construction yet, and the balance of phase two, which is currently under review by city staff. Thank you.
Don't you wish you knew his facts better?
Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
I guess one of the things, a complicating factor is that Parkway Frontage Road is a DOT road, and then Pickle Creek Road is a county road, so we don't know for sure that they're going to approve a signalization of that intersection. So these agreements provide for a deposit, basically an escrow with the city, and we'll hold the money until hopefully we get that approval. I know Tim is here for pros.
Well, for the city's benefit and, complimenting Chuck again, he has the language where if it's a signal, it goes towards that, but it goes towards any other mitigate. If there's no signal, the money still gets dedicated to whatever traffic mitigation occurs at that intersection. So while there's a clawback, because it'd be unfair to give the money, it never gets used, but it's going to get used. And Pros Lakeland, the apartment, they're ready to go. I have their money in my escrow account ready to cut a check, so they're ready to go. So you're not going to have to worry about them sitting around.
Well, that is important because this language also considers everything FDOT needs to have for it to be compliant. And so that goes without saying that you provide that preparation, and we're very, very grateful for that as a process. Yes, Commissioner McGraw.
Chuck, do you anticipate any issues with DOT County on the approval of this?
I don't think there really would be any issues at all with the county. DOT, they're going to want to have a more detailed evaluation if a signal is involved. And so the way we've tried to set it up is if DOT ultimately doesn't approve a signal, then we would really default back to looking at putting turn lanes on Pipkin Creek Road, which that approach is operated by Polk County. So we've got this is a very unique situation, and because of the fact that, the county has one road and DOT has the other, we wanted to make sure that we would be able to collect those dollars and administer them like we've done with a few other projects like State Road 33 and, over time, and not hold up the development, while we navigate those waters. And standards change over time, that there's a lot of things that happen that, in 2023, we're talking about a certain set of circumstances that in 24 or 25 may be different.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, that takes us through your comments, our city attorney, and that brings us to our city manager, 5A.
Good morning. I have two items, and then I do have a verbal this morning. The first item that I have is a recommendation for the award of a bid to Strickland Construction, and this will be to construct a small branch library in our Kelly Recreation Center. This is the result of the lease that we have at Lake Merriam, where our e-library has been housed. That lease is expiring. Yesterday, we entered into an agreement to extend that lease on a month-to-month basis while we're under construction on this project. The small branch library at Kelly Rec will house a collection of library materials. It also will include some seating for the public. We did go through the purchasing process. We received 5 bids on this project. The lowest responsive bidder was determined to be Strickland Construction in the amount of $140,948. The funds are available in the fiscal year 23 Library Public Improvement Fund, and so the recommendation is to award the RFP to Strickland Construction in the amount presented.
I have a question on this, and I may have missed it, but I think about the Lake Merriam Library as having more terminals than I don't see the terminal, the application in this drawing. Do we have places that people can use computers as well?
Let me yield to our library staff who was with us this morning.
Hi, Stephanie. We don't have a dedicated footprint for a computer area. We will have Chromebooks that they can use throughout the building, and they'll work
Okay,
on the Wi-Fi.
got it. I guess
They'll
they're in
have kind
their
of
world,
roaming
aren't we?
capacity.
Sorry. Okay, so because that's an important part of this offering, because this could serve some people that live in the area that may not have computers at home and all that kind of.
And that's Stephanie Brown. She's our assistant.
Assistant city librarian.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Question.
Yes, Commissioner Simmons.
The square footage of the library.
The Kelly Rec space will be around 1,000 square feet in that room.
What would the seating capacity?
About 6 to 10 at any one time within the room. But we also have the outdoor patio, which will have some seating if people prefer to sit outside and read. Or they can take their materials anywhere in the
space, in the building.
That's interesting. So how'd you come up with the concept, moving it from Kelly from the Lake Marion, which was originally the e-library system, right?
Yeah, and it was as a result of, for really probably a year or longer, the landlord of that property has kind of indicated that they would prefer that we maybe move out of that space, so we knew that the lease was going to be expiring, and our library staff and Parks and Rec and Cultural Arts Department, knowing that, we're trying to decide how we would replace that asset, and this was the idea that they came up with, and again, it's a smaller branch, but if you ever saw the e-library there at Lake Miriam, that was a small footprint as well. Yes. And then I'll yield to staff for if you have any other input on that.
Well, in addition, the Library Cooperative has funded the operational cost of that location, and they also were discontinuing their support at the lease end. So it made sense for us for two reasons, to find another space. Not only was the lease ending, but so was the financial support for those operations.
Yeah, because it's our own place. We don't have to pay rent.
Correct.
Commissioner Music.
So yeah, kudos to finding our own space inside of our own space, which is great. The activity space that it's going to go into, what are they currently doing with that they're going to lose by having the library there? Who has the answer to that?
We're just going to relocate the activities in that room. That room is used for whatever programming we actually need it for. And our programming changes a lot by user requests and also our contract instructors. And so we have the ability just to move them around the building and around the space. What we like really about this is we're bringing another group of people into our recreation centers. We're not all about just bouncing balls and yoga and all of that. And, that's why we're cultural arts, too. And so we're very excited about this concept. And it's a concept that we want to do also out at English Creek when we build that recreation center in 2030.
Yeah, because I have a good friend, and she utilizes that e-library all the time. So she's going to love that there's a new space, but she's going to dislike that it's farther from her house now. So, because she lives right around the corner from that. So, yes, having multiple small little hubs out there will be great. So
Well, that's what we think, because we can reach. There are a lot of people that can walk to Kelly Rec. That's our goal, is to get people out and walking. And so, they're going to come to the rec center and they're going to walk maybe 10, 15 minutes. That's good.
Yeah.
That's very good. And it's also intergenerational, and that we really, really like. So that we're going to have our young folks with ballet and all those different kinds of things, and then we're going to have some of our retirees coming in to use the library facilities.
well, and maximizing the space.
Yes.
What we can do with 1,000 square foot in a library now is what might have taken us 3,000 or 4,000 square feet, decades ago.
So that's our concept.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you. Well, the other areas, Pam, of Kelly Rec be able to stay open during construction?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have. The only part that we may close down would be the outside area temporarily, because we have some drainage work we have to do there. But the inside will remain open to everybody.
Excellent. Thank you.
There's a lot of interest in this, see? Any other comments? Thank you. I think that's great use of space. That's exciting. Okay, 5B, sir.
Okay, 5B is related to a change order number 3 with Cobb Site Development and a supplemental with CSX Transportation. This is for the ongoing project at County Line Road and US 92 at the intersection. This is the project that will provide a second northbound left turn lane and also a northbound right turn lane. It will also include a sidewalk and reconstruction of the existing traffic signal. The city's seeking approval to enter into the change order with Cobb Site Development in the amount of $135,306.71, and then the supplemental with CSX in the amount of $92,287, and that will provide for the required additional 30 days of flagging services. And so after the change order number 3 with Cobb Site Development, that will bring the project total with Cobb to the amount of $1,775,917. And then the supplemental with CSX for these additional required flagging services will bring that total contract to the amount with CSX of $913,922. And so we're seeking to enter into the change order and the supplemental number 3 with CSX. There will be a needed transfer within the transportation fund to make enough funds available to complete the project and fund the change order and the supplemental, and that transfer will be in the amount of $227,593. And we do have Greg and others in the room if there's any questions specific to the project.
Greg, you want to make any round-out comments on the need for this?
Well, the need at this point is we're about 90% complete with the project, and I can't complete the work until CSX gets the money that they feel they need for us to complete the work, and then it allows our contractor then to enable him to complete it. We've got everything scheduled for Monday to remobilize on the site, and then our expectation is that it'll be complete by April 30th, and then that'll give us 2 months to close things out with DOT before our funding agreement expires on June 30th.
Wow. This is fast.
Cut it close.
So the need is high. Questions, Commissioner Music?
Does CSX, do they have, do they have to use their, how do we come about getting the people coming to CSX have a lock and they're going to do their work, or is there an opportunity for, I'm just looking at the pricing, is there an option to use other people, or CSX says, no, this is?
No, when it comes to flagging services, they've got 2 different types of flaggers, those that are there when we're working within 25 feet of the track, and those that are there that are outside that window. And so they're unionized as well. So we're pretty much set. Now, the one thing that in this supplement, there's $83,000 that they have there in contingency. I don't expect them to use, they're not going to need to tap into the contingency because the limited scope of work we have left, as well as they have, I forget how much money tied up in construction, engineering, inspection services. It's going to be minimal on that end. So my expectation is we're going to see a refund of that money. May not be 6 months, but after the project's done, but we'll see that money come back. But there's just I tried to convince them to tap into contingency for us to complete this work, and they just wouldn't budge. And so we're anteing up so we can get it done, and then I expect money to come back from CSX.
The reimbursement.
Yeah, they'll reimburse that to us.
Any other comments or questions? All right, and your verbal.
I do have one verbal, just as part of our floodplain management planning program, we are required to issue an annual floodplain management progress report. It does not require any action by the commission. We just need to have on public record that we have completed the report, and the report has been completed and is available to the public. I have Heath Frederick, our Public Works Director, and Cole Edwards, our floodplain administrator, with us this morning, and I yield to them for any comments so that we can just complete the report and the process.
I'm going to pass around a copy of this. Yeah, Cole's going to give you a quick update. Cole is in engineering in our Lakes and Stormwater Division. So he handles this report for us every year. Cole, you can
I'll try to keep it brief. The report basically just outlines the city's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program Community Rating System. I'm just going to call it CRS for this point on. We're required to do this annual report as part of the program to maintain our overall rating, which right now we're rating 7. That's on a scale of 10. And each time you move up to a lower number, it's a 5% reduction for all the citizens that are paying for flood insurance within a flood zone. So with us being a 7, everyone gets 15% if they're in a flood zone. If they're outside and they still have it, I think it's 5% for them. So each year we do a standard verification, which we just keep report that we're doing everything that we say we're doing. And next year is our 5-year verification visit, which they come and audit us basically. So that'll be the big one next year. And then hopefully I can get a few more points squeezed out of it and maybe slide into a 6. They've changed a lot of the point weightings. We've lost some points on some things but gained on others. They just changed the weight of how they score things. So, I don't know if anyone has any questions for me now, or I can always be reached out to.
The ones that they've changed the scoring on currently that you're aware of, are there costly opportunities to make differences, or what would be the intent of that?
There are. They reduced some of the points for just maintaining records because they decided you have to anyway. So they stopped giving us credit for that kind of stuff. But we did obtain quite a few more points. I found a lot of open space that we were able to claim. So we actually went up 100 and something points on our last review. Just pushed us farther into the level 7, I guess you could say.
But there isn't something that we need to mitigate, or
Not particularly. Kind of the double-edged sword with us. You get points for all because if you have more risk to mitigate. But fortunately, at the city, we don't have near as many risk as, say, Coastal and even Polk County as a large, because they have more rivers, and I think they even have some levees and dams they have to worry about. We don't really have those. So it's kind of a good and a bad. We don't have as much to mitigate, but because we're not mitigating as much, we can't gain as much. So it's kind of, but our citizens' rates are lower because of that. So they don't need the discount.
When we apply the funds for the Bonnet Creek mitigation, will we gain some points?
Very much so. I mean, it's definitely going to be that much more open space that we can claim, because part of that is that will never be developed, and the large part of that is the flood zone. It's actually a regulated floodway on the Bonnet outfall. So that should help. Depends on what kind of maintenance, whatever numbers I can pull from that side of things. It's a lot of interdepartmental cooperation stuff. A lot of it is like with most federal whatever programs. The doing isn't the hard part. It's the documenting and proving it, that you're doing it always. And that's where it gets a little sticky.
Where they give you less credit for having done so. Okay, great. Any other questions or comments? All right.
And so this will not be presented on Monday at the commission meeting. Again, we just need it on the public record. That's served here with the announcement this morning.
All right, bringing us back to City Attorney A1.
We have several zoning ordinances for first reading. The first one is a conditional use for a new child daycare facility at the old Family Worship Center sanctuary that they're no longer using it for that purpose, at least.
While I'm scrolling down to that, the request would be to use a former sanctuary that hadn't been in operation since around 2012 for a 150-student daycare facility. area in question is kind of the former sanctuary facing Main Street. And so a big focus of the evaluation has been the on-site traffic circulation and just making sure that we don't have any queuing issues, access issues related to Main Street, Rose Street, and the surrounding network. So just getting some visuals here of the site that we're actually pretty fortunate here in that there is a lot of land to work with, so.
And parking.
And a lot of parking as well.
So there'd be very little out on the streets for this one.
Exactly. Really, the conditions focused on the cap in terms of the number of students, the maximum enrollment, adopts the site development plan, and making sure that everything that is done is in accordance with the 01 Urban Corridor Subdistrict standards. In terms of the queuing, the exhibit depicts the required pickup and drop-off area. Ingress and egress shall be off of Rose Street so that we don't have backup onto Main Street. And so the western driveway closest to Gary Road will be blocked off using cones during those times of operation. The driveway closest to Alicia Road, which was vacated several years ago and is now actually part of the church property, that will be removed within 6 months of the commencement of the operations of the daycare facility. So we're trying to contain as much of that traffic on site as possible. And then, of course, outdoor lighting, bike parking, and compliance with code.
Questions, comments?
It's a great spot for
We need more daycare.
So no objection to that one, all right. That looks like it might pass. Okay, A2.
A2 relates to the old Toyota dealership on West Memorial Boulevard, on the south side. Chuck?
All right, so as Mr. Davis noted, this is the former Lakeland Toyota property. It's now OK Cars. East of Crestview, Bonnet Springs is immediately to the east, and then Memorial Boulevard is on the north side of the site. Back in 2019, the Land Development Code was changed to require used car facilities in the C2 district to also have a conditional use as part of the approval process for used car facilities. Existing used car facilities that were in operation at that time became legal non-conforming, which means that if they cease operations for 365 days, then that entitlement goes away. So really a big part of this this exercise here, this action, is to adopt a conditional use for the overall used car facility to establish that entitlement, and to also accommodate an expansion to the south, and I'll show that here in a minute. This is just the existing facility. And so the area in question, and it doesn't show up terribly well here on the screen, is along the south side of the development site. So there will be a few additional rows added for storage and display area. It will also allow OK Cars to remove the existing storage that's occurring on the north side of Memorial Boulevard there next to Atlantic Avenue, which is also not an allowed use there. So they can clean that site up, move everybody over here.
And develop the retention pond.
And develop the area around the retention pond. And so what the conditional use would allow is the motor vehicle sales used that is permitted within the C2 district. We would adopt a site plan. Outdoor lighting standards would be required, as well as buffering in compliance with the Land Development Code. All motor vehicles shall be parked and stored within designated parking areas as shown in the attachment. Parking and storage of motor vehicles on unapproved surfaces within easements or adjacent right-of-way shall be prohibited. So the intent here is to not have the continued parking up and down Crestview Avenue, which has been a concern of the residents nearby. No motor vehicles shall be parked or stored in that they impair or otherwise block access to internal driveways or parking aisles. Parking areas are required for customer or employee parking and should not be used for storage or display of vehicle inventory. And then the big one here is that the loading and unloading of vehicle transport carriers within adjacent rights-of-way shall be prohibited. So again, is to keep all those activities on site, minimize the impacts to the residents on Crestview Avenue. Another big issue, and this was related to a complaint that we had received from a nearby resident, is that what they were saying is that the dealerships are allowing test drives to occur on Crestview Avenue, and so there's a speeding issue and some concerns by nearby residents. So one of the conditions that the applicant has agreed to would be the installation of a speed hump south of the private driveway on Crestview Avenue. They would need to go through the formal traffic calming approval process for that hump to be installed. But based on the comments from the residents, we don't expect that would be an issue. But this condition requires that process to be enacted with for this project. Another big point here is that the conditional use is for the benefit of OK Cars. If the user changes, or the owner changes, or if operation ceases for 365 days, it's got to come back through the city commission approval for the use to continue to be allowed. And then, Matt, is there anything?
Yeah, well, I'll add, this has been one of the better managed used car dealerships. Most of the problems we've had have been with the small mom and pops. And this will be looked at the credit enforcement history. There have been no violations since 2015 when it became established. So this one's been very well run. We just want to make sure in the future, if there's a new owner, that we have the same opportunity to vet them and make sure we don't have those problems, because we're really trying to clean up a lot of the problematic uses along that corridor there, and that historically has been one of the most poorly maintained used car lots we've seen there.
Does that have any negative impact to Bonnet Springs Park?
You repeat that, please?
Does this have any negative impacts to Bonnet Springs Park?
No, we did not see anything. I mean, there's a substantial natural buffer to the south that's not affecting the existing tree line, I believe, about 200 feet to the east there. So, I mean, the new lighting, if they add any outdoor lighting, we're required to be shielded, but otherwise what they have there is already grandfathered in. We can't really make them go back and retrofit.
Sure.
What was done before there. So we did not receive any substantial impact on Bonnet Springs beyond what's there currently.
I would think the buffer's adequate. The shielded lighting might be nice, just as nice to be.
Yeah, yes. I mean, we had our way. We'd have the whole site shielded, obviously, but
right. Just on the additionals.
And there are some places where you can, if you're at the park, you can look across and see the facility to the west. But, as Matt noted, really the improvements are all being done on the south end of the site. Okay, so that's where most of those conditions are.
It's been a lot of my life, and the picture to the left. Okay. Yes, just briefly, Commissioner Reed, sorry.
That's okay. They're going to add some more parking to the concrete area by Parvin, yeah?
Correct.
And so they're going to have to expand their retention pond in of some sort?
They would have to go through, and that would all be analyzed at site plan, but the expectation is, they're going to have to make up for that increase in improvements.
We spend a lot of money on Lake Bonnet, we don't know.
They have anything
to do right off the bat, okay.
Exactly.
I'm confident that'll be well evaluated.
The same folks involved with that project will be reviewing the site plan.
Yes, that's right.
So there's continuity.
All right. Other comments or questions on that one? All right. And any long-term access opportunity from Crestview, is it Crestview, right?
Yeah.
Crestview into the park?
I know that there have been some discussions between the park and this owner, and nothing's been worked out at this point. We always continue to keep eyes open for opportunities to make those connections. And so if there's ever an increase in intensity or something that has a direct transportation impact, there's perhaps an opportunity to make that connection. But we're definitely trying to figure out ways to get more traffic towards Memorial and distribute that better.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's wonderful to have a park where you funnel everybody in one entrance, because you can kind of control everything until it gets too busy. And then at the point it gets too busy, then it's no fun anymore.
Right.
And so that's the nature of my question. Any other comments or questions? Okay, number three
is a request for major modification of a conditional use approval for a bar, to expand a bar at the corner of Main and Tennessee. I think you all are familiar with the Lakeland Loft Jazz Cigar Bar on the second floor there, and this is a request to expand the bar operation, although it's a separate concept, onto the first floor.
Exactly, and I'll look to Matt to fill in any of the details that I missed, but it's Solomon Yosef, who owns the Hookah Palace and Lakeland Loft, is requested an expansion of the conditional use to take advantage of the first floor of the building there in the southwest corner or southeast corner of Tennessee and Maine. And so this was the RP funding offices, Dart World most recently. And so the intent here is to activate the first floor with a kind of an island-themed bar facility what they would also intend to do is use the same 4COP liquor license for both concepts within the same envelope or the same building. And so this is a rendering of what the concept would look like at street level. A lot of the glassed-in area facing Main Street would be pulled back, and there would be a recessed area where there would be seating, and folks would be able to take advantage of the island theme of the bar. This concept and this expansion has received approval by the LDDA. And so the conditions were really tied to the expansion of the bar serving beer, wine, and liquor use to the first floor of the existing facility. One of the things, too, to note in terms of number 4 is that both of the operations that Mr. Yosef operates in downtown Lakeland have 2 of the lowest calls for service based on information provided by LPD. And so definitely he's got good operations in the downtown area, and so the expectation is this would follow suit. Matt, is there anything that we're missing?
You want to go on the outdoor music condition? I guess we added in
3.
Next page. Next page. What there? The performance standards here. So this one's kind of unusual. The way we had to write it, because typically they're going to have 2 different kind of branded concepts within the same building here. So we worded it to allow that, provided that they're under the same alcoholic beverage license as Chuck indicated here. And now that they have the ground floor space, they want to have outdoor seating similar to what Linksters to the west has, would be recessed within the first floor, so it would be on their parcel. They would not be allowed to have any sidewalk seating under the sidewalk cafe regulations, because those would not be permitted for bars. So we did mirror condition for Linksters, and it's just not allow outdoor music there within the recessed area, or I guess on the any portion of the building there. I know the owner, you want to have the ability to play some, like Caribbean themed, like reggae or whatever type stuff there, but we just to be treat them the same as we did the others, we did apply that same condition there for that. So, but they would, during a special event, have the option of applying for a permit if they want to maybe do that at some point.
So a couple questions. Let's say they changed the theme, or this operation didn't work well for them. What happens next to that use?
I mean, it could go back to just a general retail or whatever was permitted before by right. This just gives them that flexibility if they want to use the entire building for that use, because right now they're limited to the second floor. So that's really the major change here, is we're giving the option to do the entire building, both floors, for the bar use.
They own or rent that facility?
They rent it.
And so if they wanted to cease use first floor and transfer that to someone else to operate it, they'd have to go through the same approval process?
Yeah, they would not be able to transfer that bar to a different person without coming back for a new additional use.
And then the last question I have is, when are we saturated in bars, and how do we measure that?
And that's a good question, and we rely on the LDDA and their vision, and I guess the perception is that we're not there yet, but I mean, we don't have any real, probably, objective criteria for saying when we would hit that limit there, so that's a good question, though.
Okay. Any thoughts in that regard at all?
How many bars do we have downtown? Does anyone know?
I believe we have what, 7 currently?
I believe so. We'll get that number confirmed.
Some are restaurant bars, though, right?
This would be 7.5, if you want to say it's about the same.
Would you count 1961, or would you not?
That would be a restaurant.
You'd count Linksters and Revival and...
Yeah, the staff report says a total of 7.
Okay.
Yeah, Federal Bar, of course, they recently closed, and we have the Topgolf, not the golf place. Yeah.
We're getting close.
Yeah.
So this would be the 7th? Or
This would be the 7th, current?
I guess this would be 7.5, or I mean...
Oh, that's interesting, because you are upstairs.
But it's a different name, so it feels like another one.
So 8. All right. That might be, I don't know how you do that discussion, so, and where it belongs, and maybe it is LDTA related, but it'd be nice to have some scope with respect to that, I think, at some point in time. Agreed?
Oh, absolutely.
Historically, there was, in the Land Development Code, a cap. There was a specific number of bars that was specified. And I think there was a time period where one wanted to be a little bit more liberal in the allowance of these types of entertainment establishments, to get some more activity within downtown. So I think, like Matt said, we would always want to take our lead from the LDDA and the businesses. And right now, the criteria is a little bit more objective, based upon the ability of an establishment to self-manage and not have external impacts. So, I guess that's the question. Do you want to continue to have that process or just have an absolute number? I think this gives the flexibility to look at it on a case-by-case basis based on the location of the establishment and then also the history of the management.
And that's arguable. But then we have to have a sensitivity in that regard as a commission. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you. I think I was thinking when Matt was talking about objective criteria and you were asking how many we have, if there's some number, I don't know if that's ratio of number of bars to people within the downtown that may be hard to capture, or thinking of square footage and retail space that we have, just something that helps kind of paint that picture a little bit would be helpful at some point if we're able to get that. And I was thinking about other cities, what are other downtowns, how would we compare in the number we have for our size versus some of our other cities?
Yeah, I know, just since I moved here, I started in 2006, it was kind of the end of the antique mall kind of era downtown, if you remember that. They lasted about maybe 20 years or so, and so there's a role in the kind, and then they kind of shifted more to this kind of entertainment district, and and that's kind of where we're at now. So I think, as recently indicated, there's been kind of the idea that maybe they're a little more liberal approach towards them there, but I mean, I agree, it's certainly worthy of a conversation about how much is too much, so.
Commissioner Music.
Yes, and I apologize, I just stepped over a phone call, so I missed a little bit of it, but I would agree, as we're talking about areas for downtown and having information for developers, right, so that when they come in, they already know, hey, here's what's available, here's what's been done as part of the Catalyst project. I like the idea of having a workshop on that to be able to do that, because I tend to err on the side of the business guy is going to look and he's going to evaluate it, and if he thinks he can open another bar downtown and he can follow the guidelines and the restrictions that we've set up as far as violations and things like that, I tend to lean on letting a business be a business. But I also really like the idea, if we're going to, as a city and as a commission, look and say, listen, 14 is a good number. We've done some research and we've done that. I'd like to have that out there so that future people, when they're coming in, kind of know, hey, they're saturated. Maybe it'll help those businesses because fewer bars, more people, supply and demand. But also just an information, so when it comes up and somebody asks, say, man, I don't have anything yet, but boy, when they come up, I'm going to hop on that opportunity. So
I think you're hearing that. We'd love to have that kind of a assessment done. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Again, it'd be nice to have how many square footage and stuff like that. I don't think we need to prevent press trade or anything. And of course, if you go down there on a busy night, all of them are full, and invariably, it creates havoc to have to be, so they're going to go somewhere else. And as our city grows in the core area, we're going to probably need more of them. And so I don't want to just put a finite number per se. Here's how many we're going to have. It may need to be open up some bigger things, but that's just I don't think we need to put a number on it per se. But it'd be nice to know how many square feet you have in proportion. And of course, if you look at Hyde Park, you go to Orlando downtown where the big commercial areas are. It's just that's a big hub, and they thrive on going from bar to bar, restaurant to restaurant, stuff like that. And it's part of the entertainment or the attractions to that particular area.
Commissioner Mann.
Thank you, Mayor. It does kind of seem like something that would be in our comprehensive plan. You know, you think about park space, they do it that way to make sure we're having the right percentage of green space and park space. So I think it'd be the same. It's not necessarily trying to come with a arbitrary number. It's more just, if you have your favorite city and your most beautiful places, what is their percentage of retail versus bar versus restaurants and walkable? And, you know, is it all congregating in one area that they do the bars? They spread it out? Like, to me, it's more looking at as a best practice.
And some of the mutually exclusive space is restaurants, frankly. If you have a bar, if you were capped at bars, you'd probably have a restaurant in that space.
Well, I think of Black and Brew, you know, squeezed right there in between now. You know, how does that make them feel? It might make them feel great. They'll love it. But I just, you know, we don't know. So just be nice to have.
So when we pulled that number out of our planning in the past, what was the rationale, and is that something that could be revisited?
So, you know, looking back at that, I think it was a matter of, again, just wanting to let the market have some influence on it, but still hold the applicants to the subjective criteria and a more general look at just concentration. So, you know, are they all on Main Street? Are they all on Kentucky? You know, and then looking at that relative to the management, and then if there is a concept with those establishments, I think that's one thing that makes a difference too, is if there is some other activity, like the rec room, where they have activity along with it, or music, it makes a distinction in, I think, how that bar is operated.
It is a feeling of shared space, you know, with Linksters with their alcove, and then them creating an outdoor alcove, and then with Black and Brew in the middle with their alcove. I mean, you do kind of feel like, you know, if you're the mom with her kids, you know, you're going for a different vibe than being right between two bars. So if it's good management and everyone's on best behavior, you know, we all assume that that's going to be what it is. But, you know, we don't know that for sure. And so you sort of make sure it feels okay when you're walking down that city sidewalk that we've expanded on purpose, that it feels like everybody is enjoying the time.
Yes,
I'm trying to get an idea on the timing. I mean, this is kind of a separate conversation from the issue on the agenda, and I'm just, you know, this would be, I think, a great conversation for like a strategic planning session, but if that's too far off and you're wanting to have some form of a workshop, we could look at scheduling something like that. So, I haven't heard mention, I mean, I think, you know, again, part of a strategic planning type discussion, residential units also needs to be considered. Obviously, the more you're growing in your downtown area, the more options you're going to want to have for a larger population. Right. Yes. But there's a lot of those factors that would need to be considered. So again, maybe
reining it in a little.
So a strategic planning session discussion. If that's too far out, we could look at a workshop or something similar on this kind of thought.
Commissioner Musil.
I would prefer a workshop because I think just getting done with the strategic planning and I think that A, just to be intentional about it, B, to be ahead of it.
Yeah.
And then just to comment back to fellow commissioners across the table is that I agree with you. Maybe a number isn't right, but a number doesn't have to be 7. A number could be a ratio or percentage because as we get more downtown lofts and things going, we're going to want to maybe have another option down there. But I would like to get ahead of it just for the sake of the developers coming in to give them the proper information.
Yeah, because I mean, you can all agree, when you're walking down a street in your favorite city and it's all bars, that's a feel.
Yeah.
And then you walk in your other favorite city and it's a good mix of retail, bars, restaurants. I think that's what we're hoping for. And so what is that, perfect mix? And then kind of go from there.
Good comments. Matt, what are some tripping triggers on this specific proposal? If what would violate the provision that we're providing?
I mean, we have the state-owned language in there in terms of the number of code enforcement violations, Chuck, we carried over. I mean, it's really performance-based, so if you have bad management, you have the opportunity at some point to come back and revoke it. But as we indicated, Mr. Wassup, he's been showing a good actor here.
Very responsible.
Like that. So we don't foresee any problems with him. So this one, he's a known quantity, so we were comfortable with that aspect here.
And part of what you were limiting to is the music that would be extending out.
And all the people will be outside now, not just inside his establishment.
Yeah, I know back in December, my wife and I were having dinner in 1961. We were out on the patio there on the street. I think the few doors down Linkster, some people are getting a little bit rowdy and getting a little bit loud, and I was like, I'm glad they were on the sidewalk at least. But, better not you people, when they drink, they can get a little more vocal.
No, there'll be two of those right back,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But having like number 4 is important, right? Having the guideline, having the fences is what, keeps him nervous enough to keep a hold of it, but gives us enough of a leash to be able to pull back. Okay. Good conversation. Appreciate it. I know it's a little bit of a diversion on this topic, but I think it's a necessary one, and we're getting there. So thank you for the call for the workshop. We'll work that in as we can prioritize that and go forward and give staff enough time to be able to kind of get their thoughts around all the parameters that you might want to put into place to discuss. Okay?
All right, the last ordinance is a request for straight zoning from C1 to multifamily on property north of Lake Wire.
So the subject site was where Zora's used to be located in the old house there, just east of Martin Luther King Avenue. And so, as Mr. Davis said, the request is to go for MF22 straight residential multifamily zoning to accommodate ultimately a 32-unit apartment community. Would be proposed right up on Peachtree Street. Parking would be behind towards the in-town bypass.
The rendering is here, if you want to show the rendering.
Yeah.
So this is following the trend around Lake Wire we're seeing as far as the investment in multifamily. To the east there, we have another project that's currently going through site plan review. And then, of course, the former Florida Tile site, that one's under construction now. So we're seeing a lot of market demand and interest in developing new multifamily around the lake there. This property is the Emery Bryant House. It's a 1920s single-family home, and I believe the accessory unit they have back there. And staff has been working with the owner to see if we can maybe work with third party to relocate and save the structure, which would be ideal. There's a certain individual who likes to buy historic properties and move them, so hopefully that will come through and they'll find some place to save it. It is a very nice house otherwise, but unfortunately it's been vacant for I think about 12 years since the doors closed, and there's been no demand for a new restaurant there. I believe part of 2003 it was actually its own 01 office, so that residing in 2003 was really for restaurant type use, but if you know an area beyond that, there's just not a lot of other reason to go over there to bring someone to do that. So unfortunately, that was not sustainable.
It's not, that home is not protected otherwise.
Correct, it's not historic area, it's not landmarked like that, but certainly it is a significant.
It's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Why would it not be contributing?
Because it's not in a historic preserved neighborhood probably, right?
It's not part of Munn Park.
Right.
It's not Lake Morton or Dixieland.
No one famous lived there, or I know there's other things that constitute historically contributing.
That was my question, is, how can we in some places, have that overview of we can't change the roof line, we can't change the windows, we can't do this, but this could go by the wayside unless somebody comes in and saves it.
Correct.
Well, and have we checked all the state maps? Because I know that I've seen buildings that are not even in our local marked as
But they're on
contributing,
state or
but they're on the
national.
state, and they find out that that's a state, it's been submitted as a state contributing structure.
And that's also right by the Lake Wire, the encampment of Buffalo Soldiers. So that area does have some historic notes attached to it.
Which is also, though, why it'd be a wonderful place to live in a multifamily.
Well, no, I'm not arguing that, but I'm just saying, I think
Right.
it would be a great place for multifamily, but I also don't think it should come at the expense of our history.
I think that if you're a really creative developer, you'd keep that as your third space and build your big multifamily behind it.
Okay.
But of course, I didn't buy it.
That's right. It's only money.
It's only money. Only other people's money.
Commission music. At what point do we look from a development standpoint and say, looking at the rendering, obviously this is relatively small in height. What was it, 3 stories? 4 stories. At what point do we look at the idea of having
when we look around the other side of Lake Wire, when the apartment's going up, we've got retail on the bottom. At what point does kind of that trigger the idea of, hey, we need to also utilize some of the bottom space for retail at this point?
I think one of the...
Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
And one of the challenges in this area is without, now that Lake Wire Drive has been removed from Bay Street up to Lawton Childs, it's very, it's a very isolated part of the lakefront.
But it's beautiful, walkable. It's got our path around it.
And they can use it,
The
people that live there.
right. How about everyone?
Yes. Well,
you can
To Commissioner,
You can go
to
walk
go
it,
to
but
retail.
on a connecting point. Well, I would suspect that on a limiting amount of footprint, you don't have to make the project work. You have to have enough multifamily space built into it. And what we have on the other side is that we have
plenty of space to be able to do that. Yeah, and I didn't even think about the inside-outside accessibility. But let's take that aside. Let's assume that this project is going to be somewhere else. Is there like a triggering factor where we look and say that, or it's just whatever the developer kind of brings in if he's got an idea about certain things? Are we encouraging? I guess that's a simple question. Are we encouraging there to be?
Obviously the Florida Tile site, that one has, 30,000 square feet of retail.
It's not first floor, though. Those are completely separate retail buildings.
Yeah, it's horizontal mixed use, so it's not ground floor. But that was a much larger project in terms of the total number of units. This is relatively small.
And that retail component for Carter is the piece that they are least optimistic.
Excited about.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to get the rooftops there first, the demand.
Okay, understood.
To support it.
Yeah, to support it.
Yeah, and and ultimately that's what we need, right? We need the project to be able to work, or it doesn't work. But I remember going back in thought here. I remember looking at that building with the developer, and it's probably 20 years ago. And I want to say that he said at some point that was like a dental school or something. It was really, for a small little. Something like that. There was some education that was going on there. It's interesting that it's not in a saved spot, but nonetheless, I look at something and say if it's been sitting for that long, the interest has got to be there from somebody, and like we say, we didn't buy it, so.
And one of the important things to know too is that because this is straight zoning, the layout plan and these renderings are not binding. So they can come in with
the idea, though.
The idea.
Yeah.
Well, it just seems like when we're talking about all of the multifamily projects, we want them to be next to you so they don't have to get in their car and drive for everything they need. And why would we not do that here? Why would they not have a little coffee shop or to create that little Lake Wire walk around? You can go to Swan Brewing, you can get a coffee, you can stay and walk in that to make it beautiful like we'd all hope it would be. Why would that not pertain to this?
I think in terms of this particular spot, because of the sidewalk and the facilities going down to Swan Brewing, it's about 1,000 feet. That's definitely within a good walking distance. And then that's, one of the big things we're going to end up focusing in on and have been with the Carter development over at the Florida Tile site is getting folks across Sykes Boulevard to access that, that facility. So there are some uses within walking distance, and as part of other planning studies that are underway, we also want to look at opportunities for other types of retail, perhaps along Martin Luther King Avenue, and certainly as part of the greater downtown west effort as well, but at least in this spot, there is some good accessibility to other uses nearby. The challenge here is we really have a street that functions more as a school pickup and drop-off line than it does a parking system.
Since Lake Wire Drive, that was closed by the school board, 15 years ago. I think reopening it now would go a long way towards getting the traffic that supports the type of feature.
And that's,
And this is going to revive that area to some degree, and so that doesn't preclude the fact that some of that might come next door to it as you go along in the process.
Well, they have no reason to come out of their apartment and walk around if there's nothing to walk to.
Right.
And so that it'll just be more cars and traffic. If they could walk out to Zora's and have their little coffee in their historic building, it'd be much more.
But they can't build their building.
They couldn't build it. They could build a tall one like Lakemere Towers in the parking lot behind it. It's a big parking lot behind there.
Okay. Commissioner, I'm sorry, McCarthy.
I just would be really cognizant of the fact that that is a car line that's that many hours in. And so we're going to need to steel ourselves for access to that. This is why I think maybe retail wasn't presented there, is it'd be
trapped.
Yeah, you'd be trapped. You wouldn't be able to do it at certain times of the day, which is what it is. But just being aware of the developer needs to understand, and the residents that move in there, that
school was there first, and there are certain times of the day, so unlike where we have Lincoln Avenue Academy, and we had to work with the neighborhood around us because the car line got out of hand, and then they were blocking driveways, and it became a big issue, as long as people who are moving in go at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and look at their new space they want to rent, now they might be working professionals not there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but, that's something that we need to preemptively be communicating. That's a great spot. I think that's a wonderful spot for multifamily housing. It comes with unintended ripple effects of something that exists now that could potentially hinder them, and that we catch all of those wonderful comments about later. So just everybody be aware that that's, as we build in density, and I'm a proponent of that, and I agree with Commissioner Madden that if they don't have anywhere to walk, that's it, or, things to draw people out of their apartments. I completely agree, on foot or bike. And it will evolve, and there might be other parcels over there that, happen. It's a great project. As long as we communicate, as long as, not us, but the developer communicates and doesn't hightail it out of town and don't really care that car line's blocking their residents in.
Well, and I think this is where we have to put a ton of confidence in planning and zoning doing their work, and recognizing that there are some things that transform an area. This is one. This is a big one.
I'm not arguing that. I think it's a great idea.
I just thought it was going over to where those other more derelict buildings were. I didn't know it was taking over.
That's a separate.
That's another multifamily.
Oh.
Yes, 88 lots, and that's under site
So
plan.
we could totally keep the historic building and build around it. It would be much more charming.
You actually
You don't get that back. You don't get that building back.
You won't get it back.
You don't ever get these beautiful gems back. That's why we love Hyde Park and Winter Park, because they got historic buildings.
So if we think about that, and I'm not trying to advocate one way or the other, but if you think about putting density there, which is in a pretty narrow strip, it makes the walkability come to retail spaces as you go along, including across the street. And so...
It's also bifurcated by 2 major thoroughfares.
So we have to plan for that too.
And we would welcome any opportunity to explore reopening Lake Wire Drive on the east side, because that helps provide a better grid system that takes traffic off of Sykes Boulevard. It provides, in addition to bike and ped connectivity, but it also provides opportunities for folks to, drive from Peachtree Flats or this site into downtown, and not have to get on the major road. And it may be able to kind of move the toothpaste in the toothpaste tube in terms of the pick-up and drop-off traffic from the school, kind of distribute that a little bit.
But that's a very big if, and that is contingent upon someone else's planning that we have no purview over. Right?
As far as we can tell, the right-of-way has not been, even though the vacation went through and was approved, this was probably 2007, 2008, doesn't look like it was ever actually vacated. So maybe there's some opportunities for conversations with the school district, and we would definitely need to have some internal conversations here with Parks and Recreation and Public Works as well. But as we start trying to figure out how the grid materializes and how we activate Lake Wire and help us be able to get better access north of the in-town, we need to take a look at how their street system functions, and it's right now kind of clunky with that break in the middle. Not to say that would happen, and not to say that analysis would show that it's not worth the effort, but it's something that could help.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Chuck, to me, it makes sense to move that conversation forward, given that we have, if this goes through, new multifamily developments around Lake Wire. So thinking of 2007 to now, how it's changed, that at least at a minimum, we have that conversation to see, is this feasible? Can we explore reopening the east side of Lake Wire?
Comments?
I'd be curious from colleagues.
I mean, I'll just say my personal, my personal opinion is that we need to have it. We need to have that additional facility, because we can take some incrementally take traffic off and relieve some pressure on Florida Avenue and Sykes Boulevard with local traffic, and that it's just part of the grid. I mean, that's what makes Lakeland is having public access to the lakes and having those as part of our scenic drives, our scenic vistas, and of course our lake-to-lake bikeway system. And so being able to have that all connected over there, to me, has a transportation benefit. Part of the discussion would need to be is what does the school district think about its operations and what are some of the impacts to the Freedom Park site, and everything else, because there's been a lot of planning that's happened in this area too, off and on during that time, and certainly we don't want to do anything that puts those at a disadvantage. But I think in terms of having that connectivity, I think there's the network has suffered once it's when it was removed.
Commissioner Music.
I was literally just going to say that I would like to kind of entertain that conversation of what does that look like, because I mean, what this area is going to look like in 3 years is completely different than it is right now, and trying once again to try to get ahead of that.
I'll be really sad if that lake doesn't have any old, beautiful structures on it, too, won't it?
Mr. Ruiz.
All new, sticking.
Everything's new at some point. Wait, guys, let's work sequentially. It's good.
Didn't you just go to Ireland or somewhere? Like, how old are those places?
We'll engage the school district and our department peers to see what impediments we might have to doing as Chuck suggests.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you doing that. All right. And I love
Those are all first readings. No action on
We get to do this again.
I don't know what that'll be like. Okay, resolution 1. That'll be the lots clearing and cleaning. And then we are to 4 under miscellaneous reports.
All right, 4 under miscellaneous is a proposed agreement with ADS Environmental Services for the purchase of 30 Triton Plus flow monitors. Our water and wastewater department has been doing some computer modeling of its collection system that has indicated that there are portions of that that are close to capacity, at least according to the computer model. So our consultants are recommending that we actually install flow meters in the system to verify what the computer modeling is indicating. So this is for the purchase of those flow monitors to get some more information on that, and then that'll dictate what kind of improvements we need to make. We are recommending the purchase as a sole source because we already are using some of these Triton flow monitors, so this will help to integrate the whole system together. It's the contract's for $315,900. That is included in the water wastewater's FY 2023 budget. Robbie Kniss is here if you have any technical questions.
Are these movable?
They are.
Okay.
Yep, we have 10 today that are in service. This will be another 30. We also have some rain sensors and level sensors that only measure the level in the manhole. These devices measure the velocity, and then you can calculate the flow. And so all of them, one of the reasons for sole source is we already have spare parts, but it's standardizing on this equipment. We have a website we go to and can look at all the results from all the monitoring.
Good. And do we do comparatives with other cities or other entities, or not necessarily?
If we do, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. All right. Questions or comments? All right. Good. Thank you.
We have several utility items, and as you know, we have a utility committee meeting at 11, so we'll propose to present those at that time, which we'll hear from now.
No, we'll wait. All right, so that breaks us for an hour and 8 minutes. Unless there's some, wait. Any comments from any of you on any matters that you'd like to bring up this morning? Yeah, yes.
I'm sorry, I apologize for being late. I had a couple questions, and then we could talk offline, but I didn't know if you all talked about the SRO issue at all before I got here. Okay. And then I have a question about the lakes at Laurel Highlands neighborhood. There are some road closures there right now, Winston Park Boulevard, some kind of impediment with North Parkway Frontage Road, Airport Road, around the Port Parkway. Do you know what that is, Chuck?
Yes.
If you want to talk about that offline, or I have a constituent question, so I'm happy to hear about it now if everybody has the time for it, but if not, I can do it.
We have time, so.
In basically 10 seconds, this road is built to the right-of-way line, but we're still working with the Turnpike and DOT to get a connection to the Parkway Frontage Road. So that's why the barricade is there, is that there's today no official connection to, and actually that phase of the development is still going through the review process. And so there's a separate.
Can you Google the map for it real quick and just show me? Because when the constituent asked me about it, he just sort of talked about like I didn't know, and then he sent me the road names, but I really haven't looked at it to see where the barrier is. He just said that it's been really trying to move in and around.
And
his neighborhood and that people are frustrated. Sorry, y'all.
No, this is a very timely.
Super secret spyware.
Do you approve access?
Thanks, Chuck.
No problem.
Introduced her. See, you gotta speak up.
Sorry.
So the area in question, this is the Lakes of Laurel Highlands, which is under development now, 631 lots of build-out. The road, Winston Clark Boulevard, is the main spine road that will actually align with Lakeland Central Park on the west side of Airport Road. So the connection down here to North Parkway frontage is something that has been going through the permitting process now since about 2018. D.R. Horton has been working on that. There's been some issues in terms of whether or not DOT will approve a road connection at this location, and if so, right now the official position is it will be right in, right out. Obviously, that's got a big concern for city staff because you're recycling traffic back onto the parkway, and there's no benefit back, getting people into the rest of the urban core. So we're working right now on a response back to DOT to try to get this opened, allow the developer to finish the work they need to do, and then give us the ability to continue forward and enter into the necessary agreements with the state to allow ultimately a full connection. So this is right here. This is the connection point. So the road today
all the time.
goes back to the north.
And are people using it?
No.
The residents cut the gates open, and we're using it until yesterday. We got the photographs of the Jersey barriers that we asked D.R. Horton to install to stop that. Because
Well, yeah, that
Turnpike
seems like a
Enterprise
safety
and-
issue.
Correct. Then the Turnpike Enterprise and District 1 are working to permit this connection. Until it's permitted, that jeopardizes.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Yeah, there's no approved, and it's a major safety issue for us until the work is done.
That helps, that's great.
Yeah, so it's an existing shortcut today.
Got it.
Yes.
So follow up on that, I mean, it's something they've been working on forever, and they're obviously aprons, money spent. Is it possible it's not going to get approved?
The change that's happened is with the electronic toll collection system.
Right.
The Turnpike's concern is that there's going to be a negative impact of having this connection relative to cars going through and not having to stop at the toll booth. I think that's one issue.
Okay.
What we're going to do is we're working on kind of an overall package. There's an impact fee credit agreement that we're working on right now with the developer for the Spine Road. We'll likely be coming back with an interlocal agreement with the Turnpike or DOT also to address a lot of these kind of mechanical issues related to that connection. The main concern is that really for this road to function the way that it should is that it needs to be full access and the city, needs to be protected against potential major costs associated with realigning this road to Waring, which is one of the longer term options that has been kind of put out there as something that we would have to be on the hook for potentially.
Am I facing west right now?
This is facing west.
Thank you.
You would
Do you want to
do this
swing around to
somewhat
the
like
east
you
to-
would do,
Got it.
where you would left turn out ideally and stop at that point, left turn.
As far as kind of the ideal world is we come up to the intersection and you can make a left or right turn.
Right.
And if it needs to be signalized, I don't think there's any issue with doing that. But when the Parkway Frontage Road was built, this was intentionally built to be a two-way road, 2 lanes westbound, 1 lane eastbound. And then you come up to Waring Road and would make a right and go through the new roundabout that will be under construction in a year or so. The thinking at this point is what we have heard from the state is that a connection to the north was always planned for. To me, that's not the case. I mean, it's just not. You don't put a mast arm in the middle of where you plan on putting a road. So there's a lot of history that we're having to put together. This has been probably five project managers for the developer, 5 engineers for the developer. City staff has turned over, and so we're having to go through and at least provide some background to say we're willing to do what we need to do from a permitting standpoint.
Sure.
But we want to make sure that this is actually a functional connection. We're not going to discount anybody's safety concerns, but it's got to be part of our grid
It's also multi-jurisdictional. Like, it's not just us making that decision.
Correct.
Exactly.
That's the key.
For 3 years now, the DOT District 1 and the Turnpike Enterprise haven't even been able to come to agreement about which of the 2 agencies would permit this connection. They've gone back and forth on that issue.
It's you, no, it's you.
Correct.
And so I think right now it's officially the Turnpike, but it would be administered by District 1.
Of course.
So that's kind of, and so that's why, the public would see the road right up to the right-of-way line and think that it's open, but we had the barricades installed just to make sure that the safety is protected until we get the permit.
And D.R. Horton put those up at our request.
Commissioner Music.
They did.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to point, because I drive this intersection right here, 6 times a day, and it's miserable. So I would greatly argue against what they're saying about it being a future north side. It doesn't make any sense.
We've always approached it is that it helps relieve Drainfield. Going back to discussions about pushing everything to Drainfield. If you're trying to get north of the Parkway and towards Airport Road, now it's kind of like a trident. You can go to Drainfield. If you want to go on the Parkway, you can do that. Or if you want to go north, you can take this road. So DOT, the Turnpike has done a lot of good analysis for us. They've given us some options to work with. We just want to make sure that we keep those, keep the upper limit of what we would be exposed to in check, and ultimately get a road road connection that works for everybody. And that's the goal, and I'm sure we'll get there. It's just it'll take a while.
Commissioner Reed and Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. While we're discussing a particular area, they're going to the Sun Fund. Hamilton Road from Medella Road is one way north now. So if you've tried to go down it that way, and if you're coming Medella Road from County Line Road, once you get to Hamilton Road, you have to show credentials to continue to going east to get through that little area. So if you're better off, take Pipkin Road and some other areas.
Just during Center Fund?
Just during Center Fund.
So just till Monday. So for the ease of traffic flow out of the park.
Commissioner Simmons. Oh, okay. Anything else? Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
No, it's good to know.
Plenty of it pretty good.
It's interesting. I passed those gates so many times, I never questioned why those gates are there like that, as a neighbor. And so.
The documentation on how that all got built isn't as readily available as one would think. And so there's a lot of, we've been having to do a lot of detective work to kind of piece it together. But ultimately, our opinion is it was always intended to be a road connection of some kind. It's just a question of, it needs to be permitted. What do we need to do to get it permitted?
But having it signalized, which ultimately seems like the safest if we're going to have a left out, I mean, that does kind of counter the whole toll-less stop, though, unfortunately.
And that is the Turnpike, I believe, is one of the Turnpike's concerns. So, I mean, everybody's got valid concerns here. It's just we're getting to the point now where everything's all starting to really come together, and we've got to pick a course and kind of move in that direction. So that
it's different when people don't live there than when you start to bring density.
Well, when you're looking at it in one dimension on a piece of paper, and again, you don't drive it or look at it. And also, I mean, I think one of the problems in Florida right now is that we've continually had open space and open land, and we're like, nothing's ever, swampland, nothing's ever going to be there. And then we learned to mitigate, and we learned to change technology. So when we built the Parkway, I'm sure there wasn't thought that there'll be 500 houses or whatever just north of the Parkway. It was like, oh, this is a great road, and that's why planning and your team is so vitally important.
I'd like to not hop over and recognize how quickly Palmer moved that from two-dimensional.
I did too.
We were all impressed. We were all impressed. I don't want to let that pass.
That was it's probably the limit of my technical ability.
IT Palmer.
I've never done that.
I've never
haven't either.
I was like, man, I got to.
And highlighting the roadways and.
First of all, I thought, Palmer, you shouldn't touch that.
I thought the same thing.
I know. I was like, what is he doing?
He's doing a presentation, don't do that, Palmer. Okay, so you enhanced everything. Thank you so much for that, sir. We were impressed. City Manager Strauss.
Commissioner McCarley kind of mentioned something there, and I've had a few other texts from other commissioners about the discussion about the SRO program. I can tell you that staff had, I can't say we didn't have any, but we had very little communication that presentation or discussion was going to occur. We had heard some things. As you know, I'm not one who interacts with a lot of elected officials. I leave that to you folks, but I did call in advance and talk to at least one school board member just to ask that if in fact that was a discussion, that Lakeland at least as the first agency to have an SRO program in the county with many years of investments in capital and personnel, that we would have an opportunity at some point to evaluate exactly what this discussion would mean to us before any action would be taken. That was the conversation that I had. We did have someone yesterday contact us from the school board and is asking, set a meeting with Chief Taylor and myself and with them. And so we'll have that discussion that's being scheduled if it hasn't already been scheduled. And I would also just comment that, as you know, we provide SROs not only to the public school system, but to the private schools as well. And so what the impacts would be to each of those categories is still a little uncertain. So it's very much still a conversation, and we'll know more once we've had that meeting that was discussed yesterday and have the ability to meet with folks from the school board.
Commissioner McCarley.
I would like to strongly encourage that discussion to maintain our LPD presence. I mean, I know, I don't know, I love Polk County Sheriff's Office, and I've met their team that does the Guardian program, and they're great, but I just feel like historically our community has seen this as a value and a protective service for our students that live in and around Lakeland, and I would like to strongly support our SRO program, having, kids go through charter and public schools for the last 18 years. They've done a remarkable job, and I like how they operate. If we can operate in tandem with them, I would, highly encourage the school district to hear our encouragement of that.
I strongly concur. Commissioner McClellan.
Thank you. So, Sean, nothing is final yet. I had a parent contact me yesterday under the impression that this is a done deal.
It's kind of under the impression it was done.
I can't necessarily speak for that in terms of the school board. I'm not exactly sure what their decisions were and whether those things are final or not. And so that's going to be a big part of the discussion in this meeting that we've now got scheduled.
My school board member conversation yesterday was not final, but under discussion. And my comment to them was that at the very worst, you'd want to do this with phasing we all agree on over time and cost, but you wouldn't want to do that because of the fact that we have a strong program. And it is
multi-years of investment.
Yes,
and
right.
relationships.
You take every SRO is $150,000 capital investment on top of the fact, what they do as an individual and their placements. So you have all that. Am I low on my number?
No, but I think we need to have that meeting and evaluate, because from a strategic standpoint for the city of Lakeland, depending on what ultimately is decided, if it hasn't been already, that's going to determine probably how soon or how much longer before a transition like that would occur.
Right.
There's a lot of financial strategy involved.
And impact, negative impact.
Well, again, I would let staff provide that for you once we have a better understanding of what that would mean.
We'd be delighted to wait to listen.
Okay, thank you.
But it's a concern.
With the understanding it's a concern.
Commissioner Sims.
I seem to have missed the issue. Someone explain to me what's going on with SROs?
Who wants to pick it up? So
just, there's been I've been reached out to via email from constituents that there is, that this Polk County provides guardians, which are like SROs, Polk County Sheriff's Office, to the majority of our county, right? Every school except for Lakeland City Schools. So Lakeland City Schools have always had school resource officers on their campuses within the city limits. I don't know if we go beyond the city limits. Do we do George Jenkins too, or is it?
No.
No, just within the city limits. We've had LPD presence on our school campuses. So what we have heard, and that's why it's imperative for the team to go and meet with the school district, is that Polk County Sheriff's Office will take over our schools and provide the guardians, and then phase out the LPD presence. I personally, just from having experience with LPD, think that it's a long-standing program that's been really successful. So that's why I brought it up, is to strongly encourage our team to figure out how this will work best in serving our citizens, working with our citizens, understanding that, I will say the Guardian program through our Inside PCPS class that we're in, they did a presentation, they do an outstanding job as well. I believe we've probably been doing it a little bit longer, and we have some personal relationships at those school sites that are a little different because our team is here.
And those personal relationships take years to establish, and they exist, and they're well balanced.
So there's a pending policy change from the school district.
Potential policy
change.
And so we just don't want to be grandfathered underneath it.
Well, and certainly,
Without discussion.
Certainly without discussion.
well, and certainly with the current shooting, I'm sure the emphasis is on safety, but there are other factors. I mean, with our pre-arrest diversion tactics and what we decide, how we address students and handle that, I don't know, is that the same as how Polk County does that? And even from the peace meeting, it seemed to be maybe a little different. So, there's more than certainly safety is paramount, the number one. But there are other things that keep our kids safe and out of jail and going to school and all of the things, too, that might be different. So.
And a strong history of success in that process.
Yes.
Okay. So we will rely on staff's ability to work through that.
As soon as we have the meetings and no more, we'll be updating the commission, whether that's a workshop or one-on-ones. Likely will be one-on-ones, and then could potentially be a workshop as soon as we know more.
Answer your questions.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, any other matters to be brought up? We have 15 minutes then to our utility committee meeting. We're adjourned. Thank you.